Upon editing my final presentation, it will definitely be easier for you to watch my final film first and then come back to the presentation if that's not the order you've already done, as just things make more sense that way. Enjoy my presentation. Hello, my name is Benjamin Potter, and in this presentation I will be discussing my initial ideas and then how I moved on to research about all those different ideas, and then how I produced the film, and then finally how I reflected and evaluated on my final product. This is my Google Drive, and I have separate folders for each area of the final project. So we have context, research, problem solving, production paperwork, and finally reflection and evaluation. Starting with the checklist. The checklist was a way that students were able to track all of their work and see, which sections they had done, what they hadn't done, what they thought could potentially be improved. And we were able to use the 4 color-coded system that the college were already using for fail, pass, merit, and distinction. You were able to fill out each box with how you thought that you had completed that piece of work. And then the tutors were able to then go through and mark your work, and then they were able to fill out what they thought that you had completed that work if it was either pass, merit, distinction. Starting in the context folder, we have my proposals, we have my script, and we have my pitch. In the proposal folder, I have multiple drafts of either my UAL proposal and my one-page proposal. And in my first draft is my very, very initial idea of what I wanted the project to be about. The production started off as an urban sci-fi thriller set in a dystopian future where we follow the lead character who gains special abilities, and the story unfolds where the main character decides what he wants to do with his newfound superpowers. I knew that from the beginning I wanted to create a piece that, challenged me in a few ways. So having more visual effects shots and having more actors and just a bigger scope for the overall film. I knew that I wanted my initial idea to be challenging, and I didn't want the process to be easy and just like, well, I've already done this, I know how to do this. I wanted to do things that had never been done before by myself. And I just wanted to challenge myself so that I know that the product would be the best that I could try and make it. My initial idea, I wanted it to be set in a very heavy dystopian future that mainly took place on the outskirts of an advanced futuristic city, much like London, but it was a few years into the future where there had been lots of technological advancements. I wanted to fuse the idea of like superheroes and urban violence, together with some of the ideas being drawn from The Dark Knight and Attack the Block. But as I wrote more drafts of the script, the idea became way more fleshed out, and it became a lot more grounded, and it became way more of a personal story of the character and the start to their hero's journey. I had initially written down my idea in a separate document of all the different points that I wanted to hit. For example, I wanted the character to be walking home. I wanted the character to then get mugged, but I didn't know how I wanted to word it. And so I initially wrote that down in one thing, and then I copied that over to the first draft of my script. And from just looking there, I had some bits of dialogue and I had some bits written down, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. And then over the course of time, and as I kept doing more revisions from draft 3 to draft 4, and then all the way to draft 6, the idea became way more close to home and about the character versus his bully versus the character versus the city. Due to limitations with time and budget, about halfway through of the filming process, I had to cut the ending of the film down, which is where at draft 4, I had my fully realized ending, but then I had to cut that down into draft 5, which then I slightly improved better for draft 6. And I got rid of around 3 scenes and combined 2 scenes together so that these different events would happen at the same time. Just because of time restraints, I wasn't able to get it all filmed, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get it all filmed, so I had to cut those bits out. And initially in my first idea, I had the bully have physical enhancements so that he could then fight Zach in that final few moments, and that they could have a one-on-one battle. Even though that Zach is starting to use his powers, they were still equal-footed, but Zach was then overpowered, and then that's when Zach has his next step up, and that's when he really overpowers the bully. But I just had to cut all of that out for time and just cut straight from the first power up to just obliterating the bully. And because of the scaling down and the decisions I made during the production, it felt quite rushed, as there's always kind of meant to be in a superhero film where the character is down on their knees and they don't know a way out, but then, you know, they remember an inspirational quote from their master, or they remember that there's a loved one waiting for them, and there's just that moment where they're really down and they just don't think they can do it, but that one thing just reminds them to keep pushing and to keep driving, and then that's when they go ahead and they fight the big boss, as there's always that moment of hesitation, like, can I really do this? And then they remember what that person said in the previous part of the film, and then they go for it. And most of the time they win, unless it's a two-parter film. And because I had to condense my idea down, and because the film wasn't that long, I felt that it was quite rushed between that step of being knocked down and then finally facing the bully. Through the many drafts of my script, I was able to get multiple versions of feedback from professional contributors to classmates to the actors involved, and it really was useful as a way to influence my next draft and how I could make it better and how I could just keep on improving and revising it. And when it came down to shooting, the script itself was, for most of it, used line for line, but for other sections was used as a baseline of what had to happen in the scene. For example, in the fight scene, I just read, I was like, right, I know that I want this part to happen, and I know that I want to get from this position to the floor. And so then we kind of just like roughly thought, right, what have I written down? How could it be improved? How does this practically work? And so in those situations, it was very much used as a baseline, just like, right, this is what I wanted, and this is, you know, what we've created. But for most of it, it was very much read line for line, and very much the spirit of what the script had said. And the actors were very good at reading the script and saying, hey, this line doesn't quite sound right, or it just doesn't work. Is there a way I can rephrase it? So we went back and forth between director and actor and what the effect I wanted for that specific line to be. And once I'd come up with my idea in my proposals, I then was able to start doing my research, and to keep up on top of all my research and all of, you know, the different documents that I would be writing. And this is where the schedule was used. The schedule was a useful way to track and plan when parts of the project would be completed in relation to the final deadline. It was very useful as I was able to cross-check with my checklist all the different items. So if I needed to get my pitch done, or if I need to get more drafts on my script, from research to audience feedback to visual research to my problem solving, I was then able to put all of those different things into my schedule so that I can know, like, right, on this day I'm going to do my pitch, and I'm going to, in my pitch, start doing research. I tried to use it daily, and I kept updating it with, like, right, tomorrow I want to start this piece of work, and so the next day I want to start that piece of work. But when it came to the filming aspect, I very much used it as a way of how I was going to juggle all the different components that are needed to film, from a camera person to a sound person to all the different actors. I was able to write down when I would ask my actors and my film crew when they're free, and then I was able to write that down in my schedule and see, right, these person are free these days, and this person's not free this day, meaning I could shoot this scene but I can't shoot that scene. It was successful in the short term, as I was able to plan about 2 weeks in advance. So if I was starting my context, I was able to write down of, like, when I wanted to complete each work around 2 weeks in advance. Otherwise it would be too up in the air of, like, if I took too long to do one piece of document, it would just backlog everything else. And so I was just able to kind of use it per week, or, you know, 2 weeks to plan ahead of, like, right, I'm thinking about doing this next week and that next week. However, after about 2 weeks, it became very vague, and it mainly was just writing down, like, right, I roughly want to be starting this overall piece of work or this document then, and not the specific details. For example, with target audience research, and I want to get the commissioning process done, and I want to write about, you know, trends, surveys and statistics, where as if I was on that day, then I would roughly be thinking about, okay, so about here I want to be roughly finishing my proposal, and not like a specific point and not a specific part of that work. When I was doing my journal entry for the day, I'd then be able to put that into my schedule of what I had actually completed that day, as opposed to what I predicted I would complete, and then move, if I didn't get a piece of work done or I didn't get a specific part of research done, I was then able to reorganize it and rejig it each day after I would do my reflective journal entry for that day. And then we come to my pitch. This was a very fun yet hard document to create due to the amount needed in that document, but it was very fun as it was very visually stimulating due to the formatting option which it gives compared to the other documents like proposals or the research report. When I started my pitch, I already knew what I wanted to create. So as I, continued to do my pitch and as I continued to do the synopsis, as I, wrote about the themes and my similar products, the idea grew and it became much more cinematic. And as I kept doing it, bigger and bigger ideas were implemented that I wanted to achieve due to the visuals that I was researching and how I wanted to replicate and, bring the essence of those similar products over into my final piece. The pitch was a useful exercise as it allowed me to visually show my ideas throughout the process, and it allowed me to visually show my ideas and my thoughts and my inspirations while still giving important information within the blocks of text. So it wasn't just all text and it wasn't just all images. So it was a way for me to more easily express what I wanted to create, from how I was going to do the budget, from how I was going to, get the people to be in the film, what equipment I was going to use and the props, my locations, and, from locations to theoretical problems. And then finally talking about how I would go about evaluating the final product. And then we move on to the value of reflection, which is used in my reflective journal. And this was a working document that was used nearly every single day, and if not every single day, at every major point that happened during the project. So each day I began with the date, and I kind of went through of what I did during that day and what I did during lessons and what I was able to achieve. And if I'd watched a film that was visually interesting, I was able to write about that. And it was a way just to document how I'd done things and when I'd done things, so I could keep on top, like, right, I know I did that yesterday because I wrote about that in my journal, and then being able to put that in my schedule, like, right, that's done. And then being able to jump back to my checklist and being like, right, I think I've completed this work, I'm going to put that at a green. So for example, if I come back up here, I had a quite detailed section where I went through and I was like, right, I need to figure out what I want my main character's powers to be. And so I screen grabbed any other relevant information from the character profile, and then I put that in, and I kind of went through and I explained of how I wanted it to either visually look and how I wanted things to, effectively and eventually pan out, so I could kind of cohesively put all the powers together, and they didn't just feel like I'm just taking from here and there, but it very much felt like he has his own unique skill set, as every superhero has something in common with another superhero. Iron Man, Batman, they're both rich people, and they make suits, and they're definitely two very different characters, but when you write down what their superpower is, you very much think like, they're just a guy in a suit and they lost their parents and they're rich, and so they're similar, right? And it's like, no, the characters are very different because of their personalities. And that's what I wanted to do here, even though I was using bits from Marvel's character Wanda and from Avatar's character Aang, and the way that they did their world building, and other superheroes like Spider-Man and Shazam and Doctor Strange, but I wanted it to feel like it was my character and it wasn't just a bunch of other people just taking, like, oh, I'll choose you and I'll choose you, and here we go. It was just more of a cohesive, like, this is my character. And the reflective journal was a useful way to track things that were done outside of lessons as well, that was relating to my FMP, when thinking about how to buy visual effects packs and how much that would cost, as well as talking about what I was doing during the day and if I'd watched things or if I'd gone and tested things. And because in that reflective journal I was talking about what pieces of work I did, we can move on to my research report, which was a long document that documented all of the different aspects of research that were required in order to achieve a high level. At the top of the research report, there was a mini checklist, just like the FMP checklist, but it was more detailed in terms of, under primary research, what specific type of research the college were wanting. And so to help inform my initial idea, I started off with my contextual research and looking at the history of sci-fi. So looking at the history of the genre and, kind of going through from the 1920s, looking at Fritz Lang, And then going through to Blade Runner in the 1980s, and then coming to things like Black Panther and the Maze Runner that is happening in the 21st century. I was able to look at the historical, economic, and social context behind my piece because I wanted to set my piece in a city that was similar to London, and I wanted to have gang violence in it. When the character gets mugged, I looked at why that there in my film there would be a distinct gap between the rich and the poor, and so I looked at the real wage gap that is between the poor and the rich in London from about a year ago. And so it would kind of lead into, right, if it's like this at this moment in time, it's going to, if it doesn't get better, then it's definitely going to get worse, and it's definitely going to get bigger. And so I kind of spoke about that and how that may affect my final piece. And then talking about the historical and the social context behind it, and because I wanted to have gang violence in it, I wanted to look at why, these young people are staying in gangs and they're forming gangs and they're continuing the violence, and why they don't just stop, and kind of comparing that to a similar product that was all about gang violence called Blue Story. And then moving on to, I was able to look at, my sources of inspiration from Albert Chang, who is a YouTuber, from the film Project Power. And I was then able to, cross-reference this with my pitch and use that in my, in my similar products and my, sources of visual research. So there was very much one source of research, and it was displayed in different ways in different documents. And then, unlike the order that it's set out, we started with secondary research techniques. And for audience research, looking at demographics and psychographics, this both helped me develop my characters as well as who I'd be aiming my film at. And it helped me see how I can separate characters in my world into the class categories between, their social grades, if they're like a class A or if they're a class D, which in turn helped me write better characters, as I could add motivations and reasons why they were doing these things because of their social grade. So if they were in one social grade, they were doing all these different things because they're trying to get at the higher social grade. And so it very much just helped me just develop my characters further and how I could develop them and make them more three-dimensional. And then I was also able to read up on independent cinema audiences, and I was able to put people into categories that was helping me inform my primary and my secondary audiences, and who they would be, and what type of film that they like watching, and who are these other people that like watching films. Am I able to appeal to them, or how am I able to present my film to these people, like with their viewing methods and what they prefer. And then came on to researching about BBC and Channel 4 audiences, and who that they aim at, and why they're aiming at those people and how that they reach those people. And then coming on to looking at commissioning process and how companies will most likely look at an idea and say, right, does this fit with these specific reasons? And then I was able to just see how, if I was able to produce this film professionally, what I would need to be hitting in terms of, does it reach diversity, does it include people of different faiths and different nations, and and all of that. My audience research when I was working on it was helping to also inform me on my primary audience and what people I should be looking at to pitch my idea to, and have them review it. And so in the primary research techniques, I was able to set up surveys and questionnaires, which I was then able to get feedback on my initial idea. And because that I'd researched about the secondary audiences, I knew that the people that I was able then to send that form out to might not necessarily be fitting with my, primary and my secondary target audience, but they may be fitting into others. And if they say that they don't like the idea or the themes, it's because it might not appeal to them, because that's not what they like to watch. From the responses I got, I was able to further develop my idea, as this happened quite early on, maybe around draft 2 of my script. And I was able to develop it further from the research that I'd done, talking to the people and talking, to the people that I potentially wanted to act, and talking to my tutors and talking with other people from outside, and as I was going through, I was able to start saying, right, classmates, what do you think of this? And then I was able to think, right, now I have a detailed script of the entire story. People that I'm thinking to cast, what do you think of it? And they're like, oh, this could maybe be improved. and talking with, my tutors throughout the process of, would this be a better idea or would this still make sense? And then finally, towards the end, when I had near enough, I finished script and a finished draft, maybe around draft 5. I was then able to send it off with experts who I've either produced it before or they're a professional actor. Overall, it was really helpful to keep improving my idea when getting that feedback. And then I was able to, once I'd come up with, an idea, a fleshed out idea, I was then able to look at visual research of getting some test shots of, some of the locations and roughly some of the camera angles and, auditioning some people and looking at similar products and how they might have gone about creating their audio. And comparing those two together and looking at kind of, copyright and music, and then looking at editing experiments and looking at how other people may have done films and, short films on YouTube, and then my own small visual effects tests just to see if I could create some of the ideas that I wanted to do. So then for the final product, I would then be able to be like, right, so I've tested it like this bit was successful, this bit wasn't successful, meaning I need to, put this in place or bring this light or, do this and this. And I was able to then improve that for the final product while also looking at online tutorials on, how other people had achieved effects that I potentially was also thinking about, like, right, I want to create a shot that roughly looks like this, and then being able to look at tutorials online and how someone else has created that, so then I could either copy or take very heavy inspiration and instruction from to achieve my own look. And throughout this, there definitely were problems and there were definitely issues that would have arisen. And for logging those problems as a way to keep looking back and how I might be able to fix those problems, we were able to use the problem solving log. And we kind of went through at first with potential problems and with the pandemic that's going on with COVID-19, and then kind of looking at equipment and, if, for instance, someone double booked, what might you need to do? How else could you fix it? And one method is making sure that you book in advance and you don't just show up on the day and expect to be able to be let in. And so we kind of went through on all the different parts of, what could potentially happen. And this was, really effective as I was able to plan ahead and predict that problems may happen, for instance, with SD cards. If I didn't have enough SD cards, then I would be running out of storage and I wouldn't be able to film. And so I was able to make sure that I had multiple SD cards that I could use in the shooting process. And then it came on to the actual problems of if, for example, ones that I couldn't think ahead. For example, there's one here where one of my locations I wanted to use, they had lights. And I was like, oh no, I don't know if those lights will be on, and I don't know what time they turn on, if they're on a timer. So I was able to go when it got slightly dark to see if they were on at a certain time, which they were. And then I was able to go back and say, right, I know that they were at this time, but this time is going to be too late. And so I was able to go back during the day and actually cover up the sensor with my coat. And it turns out that I could manually turn on the lights if I needed to. And so it was very useful as an active document when filming to go through and say, this worked and this didn't work. And so how could I make it work like this other thing? So if I was using one mic and it worked, but then I used a different mic and it didn't work, how could I then make that mic work properly? So it was very useful to have the document and a specific place to explain and log all the problems that I would have when, going through the project as a whole. The shoot didn't go 100% to plan, unfortunately, mainly due to COVID being the main factor of why it didn't go to plan, because the rule of having 6 people didn't come in until 2 weeks after I was ready to film. And so it very much restricted the time that I had left in order to film and get the visual effects done and be able to do all the editing and the sound mixing. And because I wasn't able to shoot when I wanted, it had a knock-on effect, meaning that people weren't as free as what I would have wanted them to be when I actually came to shooting. So I very much had to juggle around of like, right, this person's free here, this person's free there, this location I could use this day. And so it was very much like asking every single person, are you free this day? Are you free this day? Like, what days are you free? So I could find a day that included where everyone was free, or at least everyone for that scene could be free. This was also the first project that I shot that had multiple days and multiple shooting locations at multiple different times, and so it was harder to organize those people and say, hey, are you free this time at this day? And so because we were at different locations and some days were full day shoots, I was also having to provide lunch for everyone, which then, was included in my pitch, and how much, I was able to spend on that to make sure that people weren't just starving, when they were kindly helping with my film. And so I used the lunches and the food almost as a payment method of, you'll get lunch, so don't worry. And during the shoot, I utilized 2 people to be my cinematographers, which was a small challenge because I had one cinematographer here, Sasha, that was working with me and, very much knows what film is about. And we were able to easily communicate like, hey, this is a 2-shot, or this is a low angle shot, and because of this reason. But he wasn't able to shoot all of the film because he had his own project to do. And so then I had to utilize Archie, who was a friend that had mainly done YouTube videos before. And so, it was kind of different going from someone that knew what I was talking about to then having to explain why the shot had to look away and why I had to be kept in one side of the frame to keep with the 180-degree rule. And, just different things like that wouldn't have come if I'd shot with, the same person. And one thing that I would have wanted to change about the whole process was having practice time with the actors. So either at college or in the location for a little bit before filming, to go through and act out and read out the lines so the lines would come more fluidly, so there'd be less work for me to do in the edit to find, what way works best, and, trying to fade the audio between each other so that it all, kind of happened at a pace that, was how I wanted. So that would be one thing that I'd want to change, would be making sure that the actors knew exactly what was being said and not kind of really just doing line per line readings and then having to figure out how it all kind of, connected together, as we would have been able to implement, the emotional beats of the scene starts off like this and it ends like this, and this is kind of how we're traveling. So when going between the lines, it'd be like, oh, for this line I'm going to be really intimidated, but for this line I'm going to be like actually really scared, and being able to work through that and it makes sense to them. When completing the filming, there are multiple documents that I, created so that I knew when I would be shooting. So I made a call sheet that I was able to send out initially so that everyone knew what times and places they had to be. I had a COVID risk assessment so that people knew that, I was making sure that I was keeping in with the guidelines of what the government was saying. And overall, I just had a production checklist of all the different things that I was completing, much like the FMP checklist, but just for production, from my shot list to my storyboard to my scripts to the location recce's to the call sheets and, all the different factors that go in. I had my initial idea in my production of, some of my visual inspirations and, some of my cinema products that I was then able to take over to my pitch or to my one-page proposals or my research report to then flesh out those initial ideas that I had, because they were mainly just in points and in beats of like, right, I want this bit to happen here, but I don't know how to word it. And I also had my storyboard that I had initially created for the older project that I wasn't able to shoot, and so I was able to utilize that as a baseline of like, right, I want this shot to look like this shot to look like this. So then I could then go in with my shot list and make a detailed labeled of this is going to be a locked off shot, this is going to be a shoulder rig, this is going to be shaky, this is going to be a visual effects shot. And so it was much more detailed, and I was then able to give that to my cinematographers and say, hey, these are the shots that we're going to be getting today, so that they could think ahead of how are we going to get that shot, or what do we need for that specific shot. Do we need the gimbal, or do we need the drone, or do we need the tripod? And so that's what I had in my production folder, from auditions to actor release forms once I'd kind of finished, and I wanted to make sure that I could use the people's faces. And then finally moving on to my final evaluation, I had my reflective journal that I was able to utilize every single day, and as we came towards the end of the project, that I was then able to reflect on things as a whole and kind of just think about what bits were successful, what bits weren't successful, and overall what I thought was working and what I thought wasn't working. But unfortunately, I didn't actually get the all of the shoot and all of the editing done in time for the final deadline, and so I had an unfinished edit that didn't have all the visual effects and didn't quite make sense. And so I initially wrote in my final evaluation that I didn't have anything to show. I wasn't able to gain any audience feedback as I didn't fully complete it, as I didn't want to send it out and ruin the overall final piece for people. But I, did show the actors and some of the crew as I was going along a specific shot or a screenshot, just to tease it and to hype it up. But then after further, discussing it with my tutors, I then sent out a form that, had my most latest draft of the film embedded in it, and I was able to get some quantitative and qualitative data on the people and how that they watch things and how much time they spend on social media, just to kind of roughly see how much time that kind of could also feed into my primary research, but was mainly used as audience feedback. As I could then see, how are these people watching? Are they watching films? Are they watching it on Netflix or Disney Plus? Are they just mainly watching TikTok? And, all of these different things. And so then I was able to ask questions specifically relating to my final project that I had, shown them, from the editing to the cinematography and, if there were any improvements, and then to overall what people thought of the unfinished draft. And so that was really useful just to see, even at the state that the film was in, people were very much liking the film. It very much gave me a boost so that I was, remembering right, people are invested and people like the story. And so I'm going to finish this film and make sure that it's, one of the best films that I can put out. And so I think overall this FMP as a whole has been very successful. As I've been able to use it for my own personal work and, being able to put it into, a show reel. And it's been very useful to show that I can make very decent content, and I, just by myself, I can make a film that was very successful, as the people were wanting more and they wanted to see the final product. But I don't know if it was overly successful in terms of the FMP project as a whole, as getting, completing a final work, but also because of the scope and the way that I wanted to achieve the film, the look that I wanted, it would always require so much work. And so that may have been a problem on my part of trying to aim too big, but I personally see it as a very good opportunity, as I've been able to use it to, take it outside of college and to develop my skills even further, and, to bring on a professional audio person to come do the music and, just make the whole project as a whole one cohesive final piece that is really strong. And so I think it was really successful, the overall project, and, the grades that I predicted for it are very much in line with what I thought I was going to get. And then on my Wix page, I have, my opening homepage where I explain, about me and who I am and stuff like this. And my final video can be found under the final major project folder under my videos tab, and it can be found here. And I'll keep updating that with each draft that I make. And so overall, I'd say that the project was really fun. It was stressful at times, and times I really was lacking motivation because I just wanted to get onto film, or the edit just wasn't working. But overall, the final piece, that what I've got out of it at the moment, I think is really successful. And it was just overall a fun experience to have, as working in a slightly larger crew as opposed to, by myself in COVID. And so it was an overall a fun ending experience to college, and just a fun project that overall was really fun. And so thank you for listening to my presentation, and have a nice day wherever you may be. Hello, my name is Benjamin Potter, and in this presentation I will be discussing everything that I did in preparation. Why can't I talk? Right, okay, I will be discussing my FMP and the process that I used. I will be discussing my FMP. I will be discussing my FMP and how I created my final project. I will be discussing my final It was helpful as I was able to. I can't read, man. I can't read. The FMP checklist was a way that tutors were able to go through and my one-page proposal, as they were both different documents to show to either the exam board or to show to what was the point of the one page? The FMP checklist was a way that I'm not even reading. I can't speak. Could keep on improving my craft in the filmmaking business. That is like so corny. that mainly took place on the outskirts of this big urban, you know. Why can't I read? Yo, I've talked about the opening already. Man, this is gonna be some long thing. The schedule was a useful way to plan and that moment when you close all your tabs by accident. Right. My research report, which was a long fat document, that was weird. And then talking about the history. Oh, there's so much I have to talk about. I can just go through the document now. Right. What was I talking about? Oh yes. And this was useful as I was able to put the people that I thought I'd be, and my, you know, my, but from the noises. Hello, future Benjamin. You're gonna love these. Right. What am I doing?